the next generation of lifestyle awareness that will transform your life significantly. Hi, welcome to Living Wow Out Loud. I'm your host, Callie Ray, founder of the Living Wow Center and author of the book, 8 Lessons Lupus Taught Me from Surviving to Thriving with Autoimmune Diseases. Living Wow is a lifestyle of choice and intention that was born from the truths that, number one, your body is designed to heal if you give it the environment to do so. Number two, you don't need a label or permission to be the expert in your own body. And number three, more than 80% of all diseases can be prevented or reversed by lifestyle. Unfortunately, this isn't what we're taught in our standard American diet and lifestyle culture. This podcast is a voice of hope and community where you will learn how to live a life of thriving that honors and embraces those three truths. Though you are an individual, you are not alone, and you can thrive living wow too. Welcome back to Living Wow Out Loud. I am your host, Callie Ray. And after a week and a half of technical difficulties, recording issues, I am back and I am so glad to be with you today. Today we're talking about living wow on purpose. This is just the season right now that I feel like, especially this summer, I've been very, very intentional with all of my choices. Obviously not all, because if we were intentional about every single choice that came in at us, we would be exhausted because there's millions of choices that come in. So there is a certain amount of routine and autopilot that is going to be with us no matter what. But the things that move the needle, being intentional there. So what does it look like to be intentional, and why does it matter? I guess that's the really big thing, is so often, if I'm going to change something in my life, I need to have a reason. It needs to matter. What does it look like to be intentional? It's simple, but it's not easy. I say it's simple because anybody can do it, but it's not easy, so most people won't. I've said for years that you can't change something you're not aware of. So first we have to have awareness. And then once we have awareness, then we can be intentional and we can change. And then once we have changed, how do we sustain that new intention and not become complacent and fall back into just that routine? I think it's even more important, and I really want to identify sad and help you know what is sad and why does it matter. And sad is really what we have to have our attention on. It. That's our awareness, because it is that cultural norm. In my mind, I view it as a current. So if there's a river, an ocean, we have this current that's coming and we're in that current. And sometimes we may hit some, depending if it's a river, we may have some rapids that kind of change that current. We may have some different arteries that are feeding into it. And so we have some areas where you may get some whirlpools and you get stuck. If you're at the ocean, you've got waves, you've got riptides, you've got tsunamis. So we've got this current. There's always this rhythm, and it's very soothing, and it can kind of lull us into complacency because it's predictable and we can know that rhythm. We know the areas to avoid, the areas that get us where we want to go, and we become very, very efficient in understanding and navigating that. The problem is that's not necessarily the case, and we can find ourselves off course from where we want to be. And that's what happened to me. I actually, after living what I call living sad for 40 years, I realized that I was in a place that I didn't really want to be. I didn't consider it a destination because I was still very much on my journey. I was building a business, raising a family. My lifestyle, I just felt like I wasn't willing to give up anything. I wanted it all. I was doing it all the way that I was taught to, the way my education and my family and my community and my beliefs, just the way I had been brought up. In that culture, I was doing everything normal. I was living normal and successful. So thriving is not equated to success. Success tends to go on that sad side where we are building and living for an accomplishment. And I want to kind of counter that living wow, which is living true to yourself. And so rather than success, I guess if you wanted to use that term, would be thriving. It's living your best life. It's when your body and your mind and everything feels good. That's where joy and happiness and peace reside. And those things are really hard to find in survival. And survival is where I find sad. I don't find very many people in sad that are thriving. They may be successful, but they're not thriving with that definition of peace and joy and just feeling amazing, having that energy and that vitality. That's living wow. So how do we recognize sad? We have to recognize what are our beliefs, what are our routines, what are our schedules, what is happening that is our daily lifestyle. That is generally the standard American diet and lifestyle. I guess I should say sad is the cultural norm. It's the cultural current with the waves and that rhythm that everybody's doing it, keeping up, just the day-to-day grind. It's not until, like I said, for me, had my nutritional awakening and I realized, because I had been in crisis, but that was normal. It was so normal to be in crisis that I didn't even realize I was in crisis, because I had chronic pain. I was 70 pounds overweight. I was exhausted, had debilitating fatigue. Everybody is tired and everybody hurts. That was so normal until I started to thrive, until I found my nutritional healing. Whoa, my pain is gone. My energy is back. I'm shedding weight because I'm shedding toxins. And this is amazing. And then 3 years into that, when I'm feeling the best I've ever felt, I get a diagnosis of systemic lupus erythematosus and oral lichen planus. What? No, I didn't believe it. I really didn't believe it, because I felt better than I had ever felt. I didn't have living wow at that time, but I was just going against the current. I was being intentional. I was being intentional in my choices that I was eating. I was being intentional with my sleep, but something is wrong. So after the diagnosis and after the deep dive into my lifestyle to figure out why I was still having flares and even a new autoimmune disease, despite having dialed in nutrition and feeling amazing, I realized, okay, it's got to be something deeper in my lifestyle. And after going through all of the different levels of that and coming out 5 years later in this transformation where finally I had no flares, I was in a complete state of thriving, and wrote the book, 8 Lessons Lupus Taught Me, because I realized my journey was not what I had expected it to be. It wasn't what the doctors told me it would be. It was not what I was seeing other people who were normal, who were diagnosed with these diseases. It's not how they were living. It wasn't the results that they were having. And so I wrote this book to give hope that you can thrive with autoimmune diseases. It does not have to be a death sentence. It does not have to be settling for a horrible, exhausted lifestyle full of infusions and medications. It just doesn't have to be that. And I went through a lot of that, fighting against the current. I shouldn't even say fighting against the current, although there are times when I definitely feel like I have had to fight for my voice, but just that going against that current. When you put your feet down in the river or at the ocean and you feel that tug against you, you feel that push, and sometimes it'll take the feet right out from under you and you get a little bit farther downstream before you can again get yourself stable. So I went through that for a long time until I finally had gone through that transformation, what I wrote about and then what I spoke about with the Change Your Story, the caterpillar to the butterfly. Finally, as a butterfly, I could recognize and see what sad was. I had to get out of it enough to see what the different triggers were and what the different beliefs were and what the different behaviors were that were putting me in this dis-ease in my body, that were creating this. I really feel like my autoimmune diseases were because I was in an internal conflict between who I was born to be and who the world told me to be. And so I was living this life of who the world told me to be. And my body was saying, hey, you're not being true to your creation, why you were created. You're on it. And so I had this internal discontent that created a dis-ease. So After recognizing that and figuring that out, it was an alternative narrative. It was a different perspective. That's really what 8 Lessons Lupus taught me was. And as I was doing the Change Your Story presentation, I would get asked, okay, so how do we get out of the current of sad? How do we get into that thriving? And not just that we can, but how. My answer at that point was, we're also individual. It's up to you. Do that deep dive in your lifestyle. It's going to take going in and looking at your spirit and looking at your mind tapes, your mindset. It's going to take looking at your physical abilities and your propensities. It's going to be up to you to figure out how. My answer was very much, it's individual to you. You can do it, but you're going to have to do it. And then literally in the middle of that tour, in the middle of that season, when I was sharing this message of hope, we get shut down with COVID. I described that like a tsunami. So I was still living my life, but I had figured out my lifestyle that was thriving for me. And my autoimmune diseases were all in check. My weight was great. My energy was great. My health was great. I was traveling an exhaustive schedule and I had no flares, which historically that would have definitely taken me under, with months of recuperation, no medications. I felt amazing. And then it took 3 months to have the weight come back, the pain come back, the flares come back, the exhaustion come back. And I'm like, what just happened, right? What happened was that tsunami of COVID went over me and took me out. It put me right back in that fear and scarcity mentality, disconnected, isolation, hopeless, and boom, it just triggered all of my stuff right back where I started, which again validated it was lifestyle and beliefs that were really underpinning my medical conditions, because I'd been thriving and then literally went out of intention, went back to autopilot, and I was right back where I started. It took me 3 months to undo what had happened in 10 years. 10 years of growth was just taken out. But what was different this time was that I knew better. I had been thriving. And just like a butterfly is never going to go back into the cocoon to be a caterpillar. It's a one-way transformation. And so I knew I've been here before, and there is no way that I'm going to hurt, be exhausted, have this extra weight that is just compounding the situation. There was no way I was going back. And so because I had had that transformation and I had been thriving for so long, I had been living that way for 5 years at that point, where I had it dialed in. I had no medications. I had no symptoms. I just felt amazing and had that thriving. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't have trials, that I wasn't sad, that I didn't have struggles. Of course I did. That's life. Life is going to have disappointments and distractions, and it's not that you eliminate all those things. I kept feeling like that's what I needed to do. You can't. And that's not life, but it's more how you handle it, how you take it in. And that's what I learned the second time through. So when I realized, wait a second, I can't deal like this, I reached out to a small group of my community and said, I'm really struggling and I cannot speak about thriving when I just lost it all. I'm just thriving, I'm just surviving, and I feel terrible. And I've got to reread my book and reboot. I've got to start over. So I called it Transformation 2.0, and I did that. I reread my book, went back into that intentional choice making, living wow on purpose. Now, it was not living wow at that point. Remember, it's this Transformation 2.0. And at this point, I'm just saying, you figure out how to do it. I got to figure it out for myself again. And I knew enough to know that we're all so individual. There's not one diet that fits all. There's not one belief system that fits all. There's not one mindset that fits all. It's just so individual. But I did know that it was universal. So we each, just like we each have a circulatory system, a muscular system, a nervous system, we all have food, and we all have movement, we all have spirit, we all have mindset. And so I knew that there was a way to systematize this and to break it down. So that's where Living Well came from. It came from that second transformation, when I kind of was convicted a little of, you can't just put this on them to say, figure out how. You just realized how hard it is. And you've already had 10 years of transformation and 5 years of living, thriving. And now you're going to tell them just to go figure it out. So I was a little convicted and felt even more so than ever that it was my responsibility to share not just the hope to thrive with autoimmune diseases, but the how. After I went through my second transformation, which took about 6 months instead of 10 years, yay. I decided it was time to systematize it and make it a framework other people could understand and could replicate. So when you say how, I can say living wow. That's how. Being intentional. Living wow is just a series of perpetual choices. That's all it is. It is in a framework that helps you know where to focus, where to deep dive, because there's so much in a lifestyle. Okay, how do I live through these challenging times, disappointment, loss, death, everything. I mean, my life is just like yours. All of the things that we have as human beings. How do I live through these things and not trigger my autoimmune response? Because I know, and we now have more understanding, more research, more literature that validates what I experienced. So I was feeling very one man, I'm this anomaly. And now, no, I'm not an anomaly. I know many more people who've had similar stories. Okay, so now we know that we have to identify, we have to recognize where we're living sad, where the sad lifestyle is sabotaging our thriving. How do we go about doing that? So now basically it's like we're recognizing that we're in the current and the current is not taking me where I want to go. Okay. It might be taking me to success, but it's not taking me to thriving. And so the current is taking us where we don't want to go. We recognize it. Now what? So this is where I have a scripture that comes to mind every time I'm trying to figure out, is this for me? Is this what I need? Is this legitimate? So it actually is a Bible verse, and it comes from Matthew chapter 17, verses 16 through 20. And in this particular passage, Jesus is teaching the people how to recognize false prophets. But it feels to me like this counsel could be more widely applied. It just helps me discern on a broader level if something is what it says, if it's going to have what I think it's going to have. So this is Matthew chapter 17, verses 16 through 20. You will know them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree produce good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will recognize them by their fruits. So when I see an ad on the TV for a medication and they have this contrived setting that's depicting these healthy individuals doing the things that they couldn't do with their disease, maybe wearing clothing that's showing their skin or just living a happy, great life. And then it says there are potential side effects that are not depicted, such as fatigue or dizziness, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, sexual dysfunction, heart attack, stroke, death. The list goes on and on. Then it even goes as far as to say, do not take this medication if you have XYZ condition, or if you have an allergy to this medication. Well, how do you know you have an allergy to this medication if you've never taken it? So it's inconsistent message, the picture that I'm seeing versus the reality of what it can provide, what the fruits are, and it's not telling me that. So how are you going to know? What are the real fruits of this tree? As you are looking at and discerning whether or not choice is best for you, intentional, judge Living Wow by its fruits. Living Wow is just that choice. So is that going to give you the actual fruit, or is it going to give you something that is masking it or giving you something else instead that is maybe comparable, but it's not really true to you? It's not true to who you were created to be. To discern and know, is this true for you as the expert in your body. Is this a solution? Is this a good choice? Now you have a way to recognize SAD, and then a way to go, how do I know if this is the way I get out of SAD that is going to help me with my autoimmune disease, with my lifestyle? And so we're going to employ the framework. We're going to bring that framework in now so that you can assess, where should you start? So as I came out of this situation with COVID, what I call my second transformation, and that conviction that I needed to do more, it was time for me to not only tell you that you can thrive with autoimmune diseases, but how to do it. So I went about creating that framework, creating a system that you could understand and be able to do that assessment that took me 10 years to go through the different systems and to deep dive, to have some success and have some failure and go back and forth. That's where Living Well was born. At that point, I decided, okay, now it's not about telling you you can thrive with autoimmune disease, but it's showing you how and doing it and maintaining it, not only for a short period of time, but to have it, to lose it, to get it again, and to maintain it. That's the secret, right? Because that's life. Life is dynamic. We have different seasons of life. We have different challenges. I am speaking to the autoimmune community because that is my journey, and that is where I know there is so much hopelessness and so much need for that support. But I've had so many people tell me over the years, as this has been evolving, that the 8 lessons lupus taught me apply to them, even though they don't have any autoimmune diseases. They still felt like it was relevant. And Living Well is the same way. Living Well is not exclusive to autoimmune disease. It's just that's the pulpit I speak from, because that's the journey that I live from. But I certainly am surrounded by people and family members and friends that do not have autoimmune diseases who understand and employ this similar framework and are living well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be exclusive to autoimmune diseases. So grab a pen and a paper, and we're going to real quick go through the 8 different systems so that you can determine where you want to start as you are trying to go against that current and get out of that SAD current that's taking you into that surviving realm. The number 1 system in the Living Well framework is energy. I started with energy because without it, nothing else matters. It's like your battery, and if your battery is dead, you're dead. Energy is number 1. And in order to rate it, you're kind of go, okay, how is my energy on a scale of 0 to 10? 0 to 5 being exhausted, cannot get out of bed, cannot go to work. You're just spent, you're shot. That's a 0. 10 being thriving, vitality. You've got great energy. You can do the things that you want to do. You can go all day long. I kind of think Energizer Bunny on that side. So you've got Energizer Bunny on the 10, and you've got exhausting bedbound on 0. And where are you on that scale? Anywhere between 0 to 10. Number 2 system is food and water. This is a low-hanging fruit, no pun intended, where my journey began, and it's very tangible. You can put something in your mouth and then evaluate how you feel. It's very easy to manipulate, but it is definitely a system of our lifestyle that has an absolute impact on thriving. So food and water, where are you at in that system? You're just on the go and grabbing what's in front of you, mindlessly eating, just no thought about what it is you're eating, when you're eating, how you're eating, none of those things. And again, I don't want you to feel like there's judgment in this. This is just an individual assessment, and I've been there. So that's why I make these analogies and these relations, because I literally have been there, and I know the difference it makes. 0 is just that sad. You're eating what everybody else is eating and not thinking at all about it. And then number 10 is that you're very dialed in. You know exactly what your superfoods are. You know what your personal poisons are, and you avoid them. You nourish, and you have a very thorough and intentional food and hydration routine. So 10, 0. Where are you at on that rating scale? Number 3 is self-care and movement. For me, self-care and movement are tied inextricably because movement is part of my self-care and self-care is part of my movement. So you have to take time to do it. You have to do something that you want and that keeps you motivated and feels good. So I put self-care and movement, even though they probably could be two separate systems, I put them together because I feel like kind of like food and water, they just are inextricably linked. On a scale of 0 to 10, 0 would be that you are not taking any time for yourself. You are not moving your body at all. You are running on autopilot, getting everything else done for everyone else, and no time left for you. And then 10 is that you know exactly what feels good in your body, what fuels your body. You know what movement you like to do and that you choose to do, and that you're doing it every day, all the time. Like it is just who you are. You're taking time out. You're being intentional about that movement, about that self-care. And you've got a rhythm that is supporting you and that you're really dialed in. That's a 10. Okay, so where are you? A 0, not moving or taking care or time for yourself at all, and a 10, that you're moving your body exactly how you want to, when you want to, and taking that time. You've got a great personal rhythm. Number 4 system is supplements. Supplements are anything that you're adding in. Typically, people think about it as medication, like a supplement that you're taking, like a multivitamin, something to supplement the foods that you're lacking in your diet. Supplements can also be for your mind, for your spirit. It's anything that you're doing in addition to just that regular routine, that you're supplementing it. You're adding things in to help heighten your physical performance, to help heighten your absorption and metabolism of your nutrients, to heighten your clarity of thought. Those are all supplements, and they change. Supplements change based on the demands that you're putting on your body, your mind, your spirit. So 0 is that you have no awareness of supplements, of the need for supplements, what your body needs in this season and with what you're going through, versus you are dialed in, you know exactly what supplements, how often, thinking of frequency, duration. Supplements are not something that you take all the time. That's your nutrition and your movement and your learning. So it's the things you add in that changes based on our season and our demands. Where are you at on the 0 to 10? Understanding, knowing different kinds of supplements, what they are, how they work, when you need them, all those kinds of things. So 0 to 10. Number 5 system in the WOW framework is mind and intelligence. Again, I put mind and intelligence together because I think in the sad world and in our belief and in our culture, we think of our brain as our hardware. It's the hard drive of the rest of the supercomputer we call our body. Everything is in the brain. Our mind is in our brain. But have found that it's bigger than that. It goes beyond the physical. I heard something the other day that I really loved. I thought, oh, that's a great way to visualize. Because if your brain is where your mind lives, your brain is matter and it is an organ in our body. So if that's where our memory lives, if that's where our knowledge lives, if that's where experiences live, then when is it full? What do we do when it's full? What do we do when we don't have any more space in our brain? And I love that because the truth is, it's not in our brain, it's in our mind, and our mind is eternal. And so our potential is eternal, our potential is limitless because it's not bound by matter, organ in our body. It is beyond that. And it is our eternal intelligence. It lives before and after we have our human experience. And I don't know who to give credit to, but the quote of, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. I believe that to be true. And that my journey has definitely, my transformation has definitely accentuated that. And I believe in life after death. So I believe that we take our experiences here on this earth with us into our next realm. Where are you at with your mind? Are you in that limiting, feeling, self-deprecating thoughts? You're not good enough. You're not doing what you should be doing, what everyone is doing. You're measuring your self-worth based on what everybody's doing on social media, comparing your backstage to their front stage kind of thing. That's that negative self-talk and self-deprecating that is so sad. It's so sad. We all have done it. A 10, that would be down in a 0. Now, the 10 is up in that you know your best self. You've had glimpses of your potential. Of course, we don't know our potential, but you've just got that knowing, that hunger for learning and growing to have more, and not the capacity of, no, I've learned all I'm ever going to learn. I've done all I'm ever going to do, and I'm done. That's a recipe for surviving for sure. Where are you at on a scale of 0 to 10 with your mindset? What you're allowing into your mind, what you're processing with your mind, how you're using your mind, 0 to 10. So number 6 system of the Living Wow framework is spirit. And just like mind and intelligence, spirit was a tough one for me to wrap my spirit around, to wrap my lifestyle around, because of my beliefs. And I have always believed that I am divine and that I am created for a purpose. But for me to claim that divinity and that relationship, that personal relationship with spirit, it was hard for me. So understanding that spirit is your energy, it's your voice of truth, it's your connection with the divine, that eternal existence. So our mind is that intelligence, and then the spirit is our voice. It's that soul, that connection with the spirit of God, the spirit of the creator. I don't like to use the term universe in people thinking that I don't believe in God. I absolutely believe in God, but I also believe in universe. I believe that there are greater beings and things than just our earthly experience. So understanding that spiritual realm, and I am not gifted. I believe that people are, and I know people who have been, but I personally am not able to physically connect with that spiritual realm, which is probably why it was so hard for me to be able to quantify it and measure it. 0 in your spirit is you have no faith. You don't believe in a creator. You don't believe, you're just here doing your time and dust to dust, and that's it. And 10 on the spiritual level would be that you believe in your creator and you have a relationship with your creator, and you know that that it's all for a purpose, right? That faith, that hope, and that clarity that comes with spirit, to know that it's beyond our earthly experience. We are a spiritual being that is having a human experience. So where are you at in recognizing and honoring your spiritual being? Number 7 of the systems for the framework is environment. So this one, we're swinging all the way back. This one is probably one of the easiest to control, because it doesn't take a genius to go, okay, a wound is not going to heal if it's a dirty environment. A wound is not going to heal if you continue to wound it. If you have a cut and you continue to cut it, it's going to continue to bleed. So in order to heal, you have to create an environment for healing. So where are you at with that? 0 is you just go where you end up. You have no intention. You're working where you're supposed to work. You're going where you go for your entertainment, for the people that you hang out with, to feed your addictions or your pleasures. So that would be down in the 0 to 5. And then the 6 to 10 is going to be an environment of healing. You're very aware of what you do with your body, where you put yourself in a physical location, or the things you put into your mind, or the things you put into your mouth, or the things that you put into your heart. All of those things are your environment, and you're very particular about how you allow, who you allow, and what you allow in your environment. Now, with this, we live in a sad world. That is our cultural norm. So you're going to live in that, but how do you protect your environment? How do you set it up to maximize your thriving? That's the 0 to 10 for environment. How are you doing with creating an environment of healing? And then the final system for Living Wow is the autoimmune conditions. Now, this particular system, again, the perspective that I come from is autoimmune. But again, I could even just say symptoms. I could just put symptoms in for number 8, and it would also be relevant, because everyone has symptoms. So any symptom, even if you don't have a diagnosis, even if you don't have a label yet, what are your symptoms? And because those symptoms, and in my case, now that I have had those symptoms for 25 years that I've had symptoms and diagnoses at different times along that 25-year path, I now know if something flares, if I have a symptom like pain or weight gain or fatigue, skin lesions, those are some of my indicator lights. So if I have those, then I can go, okay, it's time for me to do an assessment of the systems and figure out, do I need to dial in my food? Where am I at with my faith right now? Am I living in fear or am I living in faith? Am I trusting my mind? Am I learning? Am I aligned with my body believes that it can do all of the things that my mind is dreaming up? Those are the thoughts that go through my mind when I have a flare. It's time to assess the system. So where are you at with your autoimmune conditions or with your symptoms? Just going with the flow. You don't even realize that, you have a symptom, you take a pill or an ointment or whatever to mask that symptom so you can get on to the next thing and not recognizing that it's actually telling you something. Or you have a symptom and you're like, I'm going to pause. Maybe I've got a sore throat. Maybe I've got a headache. Maybe I'm constipated. I'm just going to go, okay, what's going on here? What do I need to change? What's changed in my world? So you're using your symptom, whether it's an autoimmune flare or just something is off from your normal. You're using it as a tool and a guide to where you need to dive deeper, or you just have zero awareness. So 0 to 10, how are you understanding symptoms and how are you reacting to them? Are you trying to mask them and cover them and get away from them as quickly as possible? Or are you trying to glean some information so that you can dig deeper and get to the root of what it is your body is trying to tell you? Now you have done, you've rated 0 to 10 for all 8 systems. Now take your lowest 3, and that's where you're going to put your feet down in the current and try to make some changes. You're gonna assess it and figure out, maybe that looks like an elimination diet, to figure out what your food poisons are and what your superfoods are. Maybe you're going to start by tuning in a little bit more to your movement and your self-care, and you're going to schedule some time to just pause for a little bit from your routine and take more time for yourself. Have a massage, go for a walk, park farther away at the grocery store, just finding some movement. It doesn't have to be getting a gym membership and working out 5 days a week. You will need to learn different tools and try different ways to be able to understand what your body is speaking to you, what your symptoms are saying, what your AI conditions tell you. All of those kinds of things in the framework to understand and become the expert in your body. So then you've stepped out of SAD and you're making those wow choices to be intentional and to thrive. And until you're not. That's why I said this is the part of my season where I'm focusing on sustaining it. How do I maintain that thriving? Because I've been thriving and I've slid back to surviving, and it is not acceptable. I am not staying there. So then I go back into that intention. I go back into that assessment. I go back into those choices that help my body thrive, and just being in that rhythm, that flow. And there is undeniable rhythm and flow when you are thriving. You feel it, you know it. I always said when I was in my first transformation, I would know when it was complete because it would be my new normal. I wouldn't be thinking so much, so intentional about every choice I made. But I realized there is some degree of truth to that. It's not really that it's your new normal. It's more that the current, I have another current. I have another momentum and rhythm that kind of flows alongside SAD. And so it feels different. It's easier and is supportive. It's energizing and joyful. It's the difference between thriving and success. And of course you can have success while you're thriving, but to have success without thriving feels different. It feels very, very different. I think the biggest thing for me is just, it feels so much easier when I'm in that thriving, living wow lifestyle. Is so much easier to love and serve and create and have that energy and vitality that is elusive to me when I am living sad and I find myself surviving. So I hope that you understand today, intention is necessary to identify sad and to change the lifestyle aspect, your systems that are keeping you in that surviving realm. It's not to be a permanent always on, always thinking. It's very fluid, and you're being intentional about this particular system that your body is telling you needs some alignment. It needs some work, some attention, and you're fluid with that. You have the tools to be able to address those systems, and that's where I come in. I help you understand your body so you can be the expert in your body, not at the physiological level, but more at the lifestyle, comprehensive level. And then give you some tools that I have found that are specific and really helpful as you listen and learn to trust your body and what it's telling you, and use that to get your mind and your spirit all aligned so that you can thrive. It is just an amazing feeling to be living your true best life. So when I feel the tide sad pulling at me, or I recognize that I'm not where I am intended to be, that's when it's time for me to do a systems check, to be intentional, and to get back on track, living wow and living my best life. And I hope that you will do the same. Until next time, shine on.
Hey, if you find value here on the Living Wow Out Loud podcast, will you please share it with your friends and take a minute to rate it on the platform that you're listening on? That's how we live wow out loud. You know that more people need hope and they need the messages shared. And that's how we get recognized among all the noise. This is where you find your voice. Will you please share and subscribe and rate so that we can grow?